I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. It's all about dry January on the Sober Friends Podcast. Hopefully you remain dry if you started, because we're getting to the end of the month. But all the things about dry January, and I didn't know about dry January, Steve and John, until last year. I listened to it on a podcast. Somebody mentioned it in passing. I didn't know if it was like a sober October thing, but I see it a lot more because I'm digging into Instagram. How are you guys doing?
Doing great today, Matt. Doing great.
Not too bad for an old guy.
Stayed sober today?
So far, yeah.
It's a great day then.
It's a good day. It's success, as my friend Keith P says, if I stay sober today, I'm a success in the most important part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth. Matt, I was going to say the same thing when we talked about this subject. If you had asked me maybe a year and a half ago, and asked me what dry January was, I would have said a January where we got no precipitation. Right? I mean it. I would have said that. I had no clue what it was until same thing. I've read some stuff in different subscriptions that I belong to, and now it's a fairly big thing. So when the topic came up, I think there's a lot to it.
If you go into the Instagram sober community, it is huge. That and 75 hard. I had no idea what 75 hard was.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm hearing about dry January and 75 hard. I guess I'm a little bit behind the times.
Yeah, I had to reach out to Kelly and Kelly, what is 75 hard? I guess it's 75 days of not taking takeout and working out.
Really?
Something like that. So you're eating clean and making your own stuff for 75 days.
75 days.
There are people who are listening to this, I'm sure, screaming at the car radio because I probably have totally butchered that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Oh, I do that quite a bit, particularly when we get in a training regiment.
And I think you're about 365 hard at this point with your workouts.
They're not as good as what they were this summer. Life makes a change, and like we talked about last week, life happens and life changes, and there's not much you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
You keep that foundation of good sleep, good water. And try to get rid of that stress. And how do we get rid of stress? Go to a meeting.
Meeting's a great place.
It's a great place. Pick up the phone and call another alcoholic.
Yeah. And if you've never been to a meeting or you don't think of yourself as a meeting person, I'm not necessarily saying this to advertise for AA. You can go in to an open meeting. You can look it up, see, hey, is there an open meeting? You could go in there in an open meeting and say, hey, I'm just a friend of AA. Or you could say, I have a desire to stop drinking. And you can hang out. You don't have to put $1 in the bucket if you don't want to. You can just hang out and say, is this for me?
That's it.
No harm.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
No, and you might have fun. They're actually, a lot of the meetings, the meetings I go to are fun.
Yeah.
Because I'm there. The dry January started in Britain. So this is a European thing. This is a British thing. It started in 2013. It's registered.
God save the Queen.
Yeah. So it's kind of made its way over here. I think the company's Alcohol Concern has actually trademarked the term. So it's more than just a term. It's an actual thing. They have put out an app. The app is actually really cool that you can track all this stuff. It speaks to me. I thought we would start by taking a quiz. So there's a drinking risk quiz. The quiz tells you how risky your drinking is to your health. It's simple. There are just 3 questions, but it's also used by doctors globally, so you're in good hands. Redo it every 3 months to see if your score has changed. We'll see about that.
Interesting.
All right. The quiz works on your age and your gender to work accurately. So I am, 23.
23.
I'm 46. All right. Hit the start button. So we got to go back. I don't drink anymore. So how often did you have an alcoholic drink in the last 3 months? So when I was drinking in the last 3 months, your choices are never, monthly or less, 2 to 4 times a month, 2 to 3 times per week, 4 or more times a week. I think, to be honest, it probably was 4 or more times a week.
Yeah.
If it's
For
one
me.
day.
For
You know,
me, absolutely.
So if I drank once a week, it might be a bottle of wine. That's 4 drinks. All right. In the last 3 months, how many units of alcohol did you drink on a typical day when you were drinking? 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7 and 9, 10 or more.
The scale doesn't go high enough.
10 or more. I'm actually going to put 3 or 4 in.
See, I'd be at a 5 or 6 on a lot of days, right? Not all of them. Now, again, these weren't regular sized glasses. Nobody would. I guess, yeah.
But I'm going with units that.
Yeah. Okay.
Unit could be that, that one you go to the restaurant that it's 22 ounces.
Right. Yeah. That's a unit.
Yeah. I used to start on Friday afternoon after I got out of work. I'd hit the first package store, get a 6-pack for the way home. Now, I only live 15 miles. By the time I got home, that was done. Have supper, zip back out and, get another one or another 6-pack or a case or 2 and drink that all day, the rest of the night, all day Saturday into Sunday, and then, polish off whatever I had and, try to get up on Monday and to do the same thing all over again. But you're right with the units. There was a place in San Diego called Foggy's Notion, and they sold beer by the yard. It was by the yard. So he had a foot, half a yard, and a yard.
They do define a unit.
It was one is a yard of beer was one.
A large glass of wine, 250 milliliters, is 2 units.
Yeah, no, that was 10 for sure.
A bottle of wine is 5.6 units.
Okay.
One ordinary strength beer or lager, 568 milliliters. That's 1.1. So I would probably say like one beer is a little over a unit. I don't. There are people who listen overseas. I hate to be an ugly American. I can't figure out the metric system to save my life.
Divisible by 10.
Yeah, it works, but I don't know what it is. So I'm probably underestimating because I thought units meant something else. All right, last 3 months, how often did you have 4 to 4.5 or more units on a single occasion? This is a tough one. I want to say at least monthly. I'm going to go with weekly. I got a feeling I'm failing the test, even if it's monthly. All right, so we'll continue. That's the last question. What is it telling me? It tells me my drinking risk score is 8 out of 12.
Oof.
Oh, man, you failed.
Yeah. Your health risks from drinking over the last 3 months are medium. You do have some risk of illness or early death from alcohol if you continue drinking at this level. But you can bring that risk down. Use this app to set yourself on achievable first goal to cut your drinking. Well, that just sounds like insanity.
Well, that is that app for, I think, or, today is an app, but we talk about it in the literature that we use in AA, is that time before we cross the line, right? Because there's a time in my drinking where I drank alcoholically, and I could have done a dry January, right? I was able to do a dry January. I was able to go 30 days or 31 days without alcohol. Even though when I drank heavily and I drank alcoholically and I drank to excess in those times, I was still able to put together those days. So this is that time. And I think this is where, when the subject came up, it intrigued me because this is a time where you could start to look at your drinking and that maybe you can catch it before you cross that line. Right. I look back at my drinking today and I'm not sure because drugs were a part of my story too. And I gave all of them up without a problem, but the alcohol was different. When I crossed that line, that was a 5-year slide for me is what happened. That was a really, really dark slide. And like I said, I drank to excess and alcoholically my entire life once I started drinking. But was able to put together some very, very long dry periods in there. So this is a great subject for people who might be thinking, just like you said, Matt, if you're interested in it, you're wondering, this is a great way to do it. Can you go 30 days? How do you feel about it? are you thinking about it when you're not drinking? Right? Like, is it just like, oh, I'm fine, or man, I can't wait for February 1st? Right? There's a difference.
Right. The big book, when it first was published, it come right out and they speak about it in the step book, that the big book, because at that time they were only dealing with really low bottom drunks, people that, they were on their last leg and they weren't going to make it, and after they developed the program of recovery and it had been around and they had been successful for a while, Bill wrote down the essays on the steps, and the step book speaks about the potential alcoholic, one that still has the house, the cars, the job, holding all things together. But things are starting to fall apart and things are starting to get hectic and health is diminishing. For me, my first experience with any type of not drinking anymore was on, doctor told me, your blood work came back dangerously high. You're in risk of a heart attack. Now, this was at 27 years old, and I need to take a serious look at my diet. And, if I'm drinking, I got to stop that, and I said, okay. So, I started on a low fat diet and everything else, and I didn't stick with it. The only thing I did is I didn't drink for 45 days. Went back after 45 days. They took a blood test and everything was like normal or slightly below normal. And it's like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I didn't associate my bad health with the alcohol. I thought it was all about the eating.
Well, you're not going to.
Yeah. I mean, because I didn't want to. I mean, that was the biggest thing. Fast forward a handful of years, probably 5 years or so, is when, life started to really start to fall apart. My wife at the time was a phenylcodeine addict for chronic pain, and she was eating those like candy. We had just she had just filled a prescription with 100 tablets in it, and 3 days later it was all gone. So there was a problem. We put her into the old Blue Ridge Treatment Center. I went home and I decided I have to do the right thing to be the good father, the good husband, the good partner, and be responsible. So I quit drinking, and I didn't drink for a year. No program, no meetings. It wasn't fun. And I lived, through a person that was in program, going to a treatment center, going to meetings on a regular basis, getting healthy and changing. And I'm not. I'm standing still and the world is falling apart around me. And it got ugly, and that was the beginning of the end. And thank God today, 32 years later, I'm still sober. I did go into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and best thing I did, in my life. I do have a friend, Dave H., who I met a long time ago. When he came in, he had been dry for 25 years. Didn't touch a drop out of just spite and willpower. If you ask him today, his recovery, his sobriety date is the day that he came into AA. He doesn't count the 25 years. Because for him, he was dry and not sober. And I agree. There's a difference between being dry and being sober. Dry is just miserable, angry, resentful, just unhappy. That you want to drink, but you know that you can't.
I often think that, because I had a slip after I had a relapse. It wasn't a slip. I had a relapse after 14 years, and most of that was dry, and not a good time for me. Very, very bad time. And I often wonder to myself, if I had made it back in without picking up, if I would have changed my sobriety date, and chances are I wouldn't have done it early on. But today, I think that I'd be confident and okay enough, and my ego is knocked down enough that I probably could do it. Right. When I first came back, I probably couldn't. But the truth is, my recovery really never started until I came back in 2010. And even then, it was like, even the first part of that, I was working hard, but it took me couple years at least to really get my feet grounded in this program and start seeing some progress.
Right. It comes down to how long you want to feel sick and tired and miserable, and are you willing to do anything to change? You get to that point in your life where it's just, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it. There's got to be a better way.
Well, and that's the whole point as we're talking about this dry January subject, is that app is pretty good. I like that app, Matt. And
It totally speaks to me.
Right. Me too.
It also goes through the warning signs.
Right.
It says, here's a warning for you. If you stop alcohol, you might have seizures. You might have sweats, anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping. So it goes through the alcohol withdrawal things, which I thought was funny.
Well, I was talking to somebody today who is going through those alcohol withdrawals, and the body is not well. And he was saying that the body's not well, and he knows, he gets it. He realizes that he's not sure how many times he can do it. But it doesn't get easier as you get older either. I've told a story when I've talked to, when I did my story on this many moons ago. But one of the first times that I was brought to my attention that I might have a problem with alcohol was a health fair that I did at a place called National Semiconductor. I worked there, started as sort of like a paid intern while I was going to college. And they used they made transistors and stuff. So they used a lot of chemicals and gases that were very hazardous. So there was a big health fair going on, and I did this health fair, and I answered all the questions honestly. And I've told this before, that when I was in school at this point in my life, I didn't drink. I focused on school. So this was one period. I was in my early 20s. This is one of the things where I wonder if I could have stopped drinking at the time. And anyway, I got the report back, and one of the things that's said in this report is that you may have a problem with alcohol. And it blew me away, because my first thought was,
would have been mortified.
I don't know. I don't even drink right now. Like, how could I have a problem? I'm not drinking. Literally, that was my thought. But that was, back in the early 80s, mid 80s probably. And then I didn't come in first time until 95. So I did another, probably 8-9 years of drinking, including 5 really, really, really bad years of drinking.
So this is interesting, because next week we have Jill Teets on of the Sober Power podcast, and she's not really an AA person, but she's a biologist, and her podcast talks about the biology of alcoholism, it's really going after alcoholism from that biological point of view, which I find fascinating. Mm-hmm. And she's going to talk a little bit about the doctor's opinion. So I sent her the doctor's opinion to read ahead of time. And I think I'm going to try and find a YouTube video where Joe and Charlie talk about it, because I don't buy it in the way that Dr. Silkworth talks about it, but I buy it in the dopamine aspect. Mm-hmm. And I see it in terms of what you guys are talking about, Steve, not drinking. I think that's where the alcoholic mindset comes in for me.
I'll give you a link to my cloud, and there's a whole volume of a Joe and Charlie tape in there, the whole thing. One of those in there in the first or second or third week, it gets into that doctor's opinion that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And rather than YouTube, this will come right off
perfect,
right off the tapes. And it doesn't matter which version of Joe and Charlie you get. They have this thing down. This was their spiel, and they pretty much say the same thing verbatim every time that these two guys met. Sometimes the words changed a little bit. Sometimes they threw something in, they added a little bit more, they removed something, but more and more, it was always the same message. And they got into the chemical breakdown of alcohol going through your body. So that's available. I'll get you a link.
I don't know how I feel about the chemical breakdown. I think it's more of a dopamine hit, because I don't think there's a chemical breakdown when it comes to me gardening.
Well, they were getting into the craving.
Podcast.
Yeah, it was the craving of alcohol. Why do we crave alcohol? That's the point that they were trying to make. The psychological effect on the brain, as far as, epinephrine and dopamine and all those receptors, um, they don't touch upon that in any way, shape, or form. They're getting down to the breakdown of the alcohol, how it gets broken down into the sugars and the acetone, and
Mm-hmm.
and you have the alcoholic and the temperate drinker, and the two people are different, and that buildup of acetone is what makes us crave more and more and more and more.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm not. I don't know if I'm bought on it. Um,
There's more
I
to
think
it.
it's worth discussing.
Absolutely.
But those things that give me a dopamine hit, or would be considered a dopamine hit, like I had to talk to my therapist yesterday about. I'm trying to do a bunch of things podcast related. I did some things with the website yesterday, and I think I get a dopamine hit by pushing and pushing and pushing because I have those addictive behaviors. When I'm in the garden, I think that's a dopamine hit. When I'm playing games on the phone, that's a dopamine hit. And for me, that's kind of they fit with the alcoholic stuff. It feels the same for me. So that's when I look at this app, the app would work for me for January. Because I got to tell you, I would get a dopamine hit just from inputting all of this stuff and getting the notifications that it's another sober day. This is how much you've saved. And that would really work for me. The part that would be dangerous for me is the carrot at the end of the stick that says, this might help you retrain how you drink so you could do this safely. I do not believe I can drink safely.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about with the dopamine hit is that early drinking, right? And not to say there isn't a dopamine hit. Like even when I was drinking very alcoholically and I would drink until I passed out, certainly those first couple drinks were big dopamine hits. But then it was overtaken by something else that would happen, right? The alcoholic, whatever that science is, whatever that whether the science is physical or mental, whatever that is would take over, and I would drink till way past anything that was making me feel good anymore, right? I mean, I would drink knowing I was feeling bad and just continue to drink. So yeah, that dopamine is an early hit. I do think there's something to that. But for me, that only lasted probably maybe the first two drinks, and then that was gone for me.
I want to be clear with what I think about with the doctor's opinion. I agree there's something physically and mentally that happens in the body that's different than other people. I'm nibbling on what am I trying to say? I'm pulling at straws, pulling at threads here of exactly the mechanism. But I think in 1935's medicine, he's nailing something that there is something physically wrong with the body. And I think that's very important because then that gives you that permission to say, it's not just a willpower thing. It's not just a retraining. It's not that you're a loser. It's that there's something physically wrong in the body. And the cure to that, or not the cure, but the treatment, you can't put alcohol in the body. Now, the next thing is there has to be some type of spiritual remedy to help fill that gap. Because if you just take away the alcohol, that's where you're just dry.
Right. Something has to replace that, right? We talk about that all the time. Something has to replace it, right? I needed something. I did take away the alcohol. John, we talked about it early on, right? The 14 years that I had, first 3 years were working somewhat of a program, not really working the steps or anything like that, not being totally honest with the whole program. But after that, it was just totally me having abstinence with no program. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my life was still spiraling out of control, right? I didn't replace my alcohol with anything else. I didn't have anything else. And I shouldn't say that. That wasn't completely true because like a lot of us, right? I was always somewhat of an activity person and I ran. So when I stopped drinking, I was able to do some more of that. And I was able to supplant some of it with some exercise and things of that nature. But none of that was good enough, right? I needed to replace it with something that was much more powerful. And for me, that is a spiritual connection. And it's something that I still work on. I was reading one of my favorite books about that today. I finished reading a book about the writing of the big book. And then I'm reading another book called Be Here Now by Ram Dass. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a great spirituality book. And I was rereading that because I've read it before. And my wife said, "Didn't you read that book already?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm in a different place now. I think I want to reread it. So maybe take a different message from it now than I were." So yeah, I needed to replace it with something, or else I was going to be a crabby old guy and nobody was going to be around me. Or like nobody wanted to be around me when I was like that. So
yeah, I would say if you're trying this, one of the because I was looking in the app here, and one of the things that I also think is cool is they have some blog posts. Things like drink refusal skills, how to say no, telling people about your dry January. Your dry January could help millions of families. There's a charitable giving where you can set aside a certain amount of money that you would have spent on alcohol. Why do I drink? What can I do instead? So I see where they're going with this. They're dipping in a little bit of the toe of, okay, we've brought you in. It's not just a counter to count your days. But there's some tools in here, and there's some tools to do some deeper thinking. I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean they've come up with these apps and come up with these questions, and it's hard to say who they're trying to appeal to, or who they're trying to reach. Are they trying to soften it? Is it just getting people to recognize that I'm drinking a little bit too much, maybe I should cut back. So there's a lot of reasons why they're coming up with these things. But I think Steve mentioned it earlier on, back at some point in our history, they came up with these 20 questions. They asked these questions. They were very deliberately worded to, I guess, trigger your mind or to identify traits from either potential or alcoholics. And they deal mostly with, I guess, who you are, what you are, how's your life going on, what's your family life going on. Do you lose time from work due to drinking? Is drinking making your home life unhappy? Do you drink because you are shy with other people? Is drinking affecting your reputation? Have you ever felt remorse after drinking? Have you got into financial difficulties as a result of drinking? Do you turn to lower companions and inferior environment when drinking? Does your drinking make you careless of your family's welfare? Has your ambition decreased since drinking? Do you crave a drink at a definite time daily? Do you want to drink the next morning? Does drinking cause you to have difficulty sleeping? Has your efficiency decreased since drinking? Is drinking jeopardizing your job or business? Do you drink to escape from worries or trouble? Do you drink alone? Have you ever had a complete loss of memory as a result of drinking? Has your physician ever treated you for drinking? Do you drink to build up your self-confidence? Have you ever been to a hospital or institution on account of drinking? And the answers are quite simple. If you answered yes to one, you may have a problem. Answer two, you probably have a problem. Three or more, you got a problem.
I think that's amazing. The first time I saw that I get one or two out of like those 20 questions, and I have a problem.
I used to have a problem with, I got only got 2 questions yes, and I'm an alcoholic. I can go out and drink one time and answer yes to about 10 of those.
Normal people don't.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, okay. So I did it one time and I got drunk and I can answer to 10. I may want to take a look at, why did I have to get so drunk and why did I have to go down that length so I can answer 10 of those questions? I found it offensive to me because it was the mirror being shown up in front of my face.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't deny it because they put it out there in black and white, and I didn't want to look at myself. So it pissed me off. But now here back 32 years, I didn't ace it, but I came close. I'm more honest now than I was then.
They're the difference between, certainly, like I said, I could have one night or one weekend where I could I could answer all of those. But that doesn't make me an alcoholic. That makes me makes me a heavy drinker. That makes me even a problem drinker, right? I mean, I know a lot of guys who I drank with who seem to have gone on with their life and drank heavy and really didn't ever had the repercussions that I had, right? So, and they've had some issues going on, but so I don't know what the defining line is there, because you're right. Some of those things we can add. I mean, I answered those things, me too. And it's like, it's pretty obvious to me. There's no question that not only that I did some research and I realized, I say it all the time. When I start drinking, I end up drinking alone in my basement, right? It's not a pretty, I don't go out and have gay old times when I drink. It's not what I do. So
I prefer to drink alone. When I drank,
me too.
Much better to drink alone.
Me too. Not only that, I could drink the way I wanted.
Yes, that's the thing. I can drink the way I want.
Right.
Without you telling me how to drink.
Yeah. I agree.
You don't have to worry about getting behind the wheel and driving home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I was still drinking, you could be totally obliterated and they'd let you go. Nowadays you have one drink and you're on the cusp of 0.04. It's very low. They don't mess around anymore. I didn't never survive. Yeah, I didn't ever survived in today's world with my drinking. Yeah, I never survived.
I saw something posted during the holidays, and they said before you post on your social media account where the sobriety checks are, think if you want to be responsible for letting the drunk driver get away that hits somebody and kills a family or kills some innocent person. And you think about that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we used to always say, hey, don't go this way, there's a sobriety check, right? Us alcoholics looking out for us alcoholics,
Maybe if Jeff knew where the sobriety checkpoint was, he wouldn't have gotten sober.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people, that's the kick in the ass.
Oh yeah. There was definitely divine intervention in that day. Things don't happen like that. They happen for a reason.
Well, I had the opposite thing happen to me. Just this little sidetrack there is that I was arrested for DWI back then when I was 19, and then let me see, I think it was like 1985 or 86. I was up in this way. I was living in Andover, right down Route 6. You guys know we're here in Connecticut, and a state police they had a sobriety checkpoint, and I had been drinking all day with my wife at her Christmas party, and somehow I survived that checkpoint. Somehow this cop let us through. And I don't know how I made it through that sobriety checkpoint, but I did.
Because we're inventive.
And yeah, part of it was my wife was very drunk at the time, and I looked at her and I told her, like, keep your mouth shut, just get me the registration. And so anyway, and that was like, because if I had gotten pinched again, I'm wondering if it would have sent me back, right? Like if I would have made it back to the rooms before, I don't know. Who knows, right? One thing I wanted to tell you before I forget, I want to just put this out there for you guys. Go to the Atlantic magazine. There's a great little article in there, and it's called You Have No Idea How Hard It Is to Get a Hamster Drunk. Apparently, the hamsters are the kings of alcohol drinking in the animal kingdom. They have a liver that processes alcohol so quickly, they can drink what's equal to like 90 beers, and they don't even wobble. They don't even wobble. Like you can't see that they're no. Anyway, it's a very fun article. And there's an Instagram or there's a tweet hook to it that you can look at. It's a lot of fun. So
I'll link to it.
Yeah, link to it. You have no idea how hard it is to get a hamster drunk.
I'm going to end with two questions that work for me. If you can ask yourself these two questions and you fail these, you probably got a problem. When you control it, do you enjoy it? When you enjoy it, can you control it?
Right.
That's a no-no for both me, for both. Yeah. That's enough. If you think you might have a problem, ask yourself those questions and then dive a little deeper. The website, all of the tags here, I made them a lot easier to find. They're all SoberFriendsPod.com, Instagram at SoberFriendsPod, Twitter at SoberFriendsPod. Working on the Facebook one. They're giving me a little bit of a hard time. But that's how you can contact us. You can even leave a voicemail or text 860-281-2303. If you're going through dry January, how did it work for you? Give us some feedback. Has this helped you with that? If you're going through dry January, what has helped? Did you not make it? If you didn't make it, why? Steve, John, thanks for coming on the show again tonight.
Always a pleasure, Matt.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.